My child, I need you to hear me clearly in this moment, because there is something I want to place gently but firmly into the part of you that has grown tired from carrying questions without answers. You have spent so much time listening to the noise around you that you have nearly forgotten what it feels like to become still. You have searched through messages, conversations, opinions, possibilities, memories, and imagined outcomes, hoping that somewhere among them you would find the certainty your heart has been asking for. There were nights when you could not even put your prayer into words. You simply lay there with a heaviness you could not explain, staring into the darkness and wondering whether I still saw you. You wondered whether the silence meant I had stepped away, whether the delay meant something had gone wrong, or whether the closed doors before you were proof that what you had hoped for would never come. But I have not been absent from your life. I have not forgotten the prayers you whispered when no one else was listening, and I have not overlooked the questions you were too exhausted to speak aloud. I have been present in every room of your life, including the rooms where you believed nothing was happening. You have looked at certain doors for so long that you began to think their silence was an answer. You stood before them carrying hopes, disappointments, memories, and expectations, wondering why they would not open when you believed you were ready to walk through. You asked me why something that seemed so important had to take so long. You asked why another person appeared to move forward while you remained in the same place. You asked why an answer could not simply arrive so that you could finally breathe again. Yet what you could not see was everything taking place beyond the door. You could see only the handle in front of you, but I could see the entire room on the other side. I could see what was unfinished, what was unstable, what needed to change, what needed to leave, what needed to arrive, and what had not yet reached the right time. There are doors I do not open simply because you are tired of waiting. There are places I refuse to send you into before they are prepared to receive you. What you have interpreted as delay has sometimes been preparation occurring beyond the reach of your sight. What you have interpreted as silence has sometimes been the quietest stage of my work. You wanted movement you could see, but much of what determines the strength of a future season happens where no one is watching. A foundation is strengthened before a house is trusted to carry greater weight. A room is prepared before someone is invited to live inside it. A path may be cleared long before the traveler realizes that the road ahead has changed. In the same way, there have been things happening around your life that you could not measure by what appeared on the surface. I know that waiting has been difficult because you have already waded through disappointment before. Beautiful promises have reached your ears in the past only to leave you carrying the same burden when nothing seemed to change. That is why I am not asking you to become excited for a few moments and then return to the same fear. I am asking you to understand something deeper. One difficult season is not the final definition of your life. One dark room does not mean the entire house has lost its light. One unanswered question does not mean every answer has been taken from you. One person leaving does not mean love itself has disappeared. One plan collapsing does not mean your future has collapsed with it. You have allowed individual disappointments to speak as though they had authority over your entire story, but they do not. You saw delay and called it rejection. You experienced silence and called it abandonment. You felt exhausted and called yourself weak. Yet I saw something different. I saw you continue when you believed you had very little strength left. I saw you rise on mornings when your heart wanted to remain hidden beneath the weight of everything you were carrying. I saw you continue caring for others while privately wondering when peace would finally reach you. I saw you pray even when prayer became nothing more than a breath. I saw you choose kindness when pain could have made you cruel. I saw you keep walking when you did not understand where the road was leading. You may think that your slower pace means you have fallen behind, but there are times when I lead you along a longer road because the shorter one would take you somewhere you were never meant to remain. There are things you thought you missed that I was protecting you from entering too soon. There are conversations that did not happen because the right words had not yet been formed. There are decisions you have not yet heard because other pieces are still moving into place. There are matters that remain unresolved, but unresolved does not mean abandoned. Your peace cannot depend entirely on whether a phone rings, whether a message arrives, whether another person makes a decision, or whether a particular door finally opens. Before any of those things are settled, I am still with you. Before anyone chooses you, values you, understands you, or recognizes what you carry, you are already seen by me. You have sometimes imagined yourself standing alone in the middle of a storm, exposed to everything that might happen next, but you have never been as unprotected as fear has made you believe. There are things that never reached you because they were stopped before they arrived. There are words that could have wounded you more deeply but lost their power before they could take root. There are plans that looked dangerous from where you stood but were redirected in places you could not see. There are endings you mourned without realizing what they prevented. You may never know every way you were protected, because protection often leaves no visible evidence except the disaster that never happened. This is why I want you to stop interpreting everything through the narrow window of what you currently understand. You do not yet have every piece of the story. You are standing in one moment and trying to judge the entire journey from it. You are looking at one closed door and assuming there are no others. You are hearing silence in one place and assuming heaven itself has gone quiet. But there is more happening than your eyes can measure. Even now, something may already be shifting. It may not arrive with dramatic signs or immediate certainty. It may begin as quietly as light appearing beneath a door that has been dark for a long time. Do not despise that small light because it is not yet the full sunrise. Do not demand that every answer appear at once before you allow yourself to believe that movement has begun. Some things unfold slowly because they are meant to endure. Some answers arrive only after circumstances have been arranged in a way you could never have produced through worry. I am not delaying you to punish you, and I am not withholding good simply to test how much disappointment you can survive. I am asking you to release the belief that silence automatically means nothing is happening. Let this truth settle within you tonight. I have been nearer than you realized. I was there in every unanswered prayer, every long hallway, every uncertain morning, every difficult night, and every moment when you wondered whether you had been forgotten. You have not been forgotten. Your story has not stopped moving simply because you cannot yet see the next scene. The dawn has not been canceled because one window remains closed. What you see today is not everything that exists, and what you feel today is not the final word over tomorrow. Allow yourself to remain where there is enough light for this moment. You do not need to force the next door. You do not need to understand every delay. You do not need to solve what is still being arranged beyond your sight. You only need to remember that I have never left the house of your life, and I am still working in the rooms you cannot yet enter. Now that you understand that silence is not the same as abandonment and delay is not always rejection, I want you to look more closely at what has been happening inside you while you have been waiting. There are places in your life that cannot be prepared only from the outside. A new opportunity, a healthier relationship, a better season, or an answered prayer may appear beautiful when it arrives. But if the rooms within you are still organized around fear, rejection, and self-protection, you may struggle to recognize what is good when it comes. This is why some of my deepest work has not been around you, but within you. I am not merely changing circumstances. I am repairing the house from the inside. I am touching the places where you learned to measure your value by whether someone stayed, whether someone responded, whether someone chose you, or whether you were useful enough to be needed. For too long you have allowed rejection to hang on the walls of your mind like a portrait of your identity. Someone failed to value you, and you quietly began to believe that perhaps there was something lacking in you. Someone became distant, and you wondered what you should have done differently to remain important to them. Someone made you feel replaceable, and you carried that feeling into places where no one had asked you to prove yourself. Over time, you learned to adjust yourself before anyone could ask. You became quieter when you feared that honesty might cost you connection. You became more agreeable when you sensed that disagreement might make someone withdraw. You gave more than you had because part of you believed that being indispensable might protect you from being left behind. You tried to make yourself easy to keep, easy to understand, easy to need, and difficult to abandon. But I did not create you to spend your life shrinking so that other people would feel more comfortable holding a place in it. You do not need to become smaller in order to remain loved. You do not need to silence every need in order to prove that you are strong. You do not have to constantly perform peace while carrying pain underneath it. You do not need to become whatever another person wants simply because you are afraid they will leave if you become fully honest. You are not a guest in your own life, waiting for permission to take up space. You have been entrusted with this house, and part of healing is learning that not everyone who knows how to enter deserves unrestricted access to every room. For a long time, you may have handed the keys to people who came in carelessly, moved things they did not understand, disturbed places that were already fragile, and then left you responsible for restoring the order. This repeated experience taught your heart to remain alert. It taught you that peace might not last. It taught you that kindness could change without warning. It taught you that a good moment might simply be the quiet before another disappointment. Because of this, even when nothing is wrong, you sometimes begin searching for what might go wrong next. When someone is kind, you wonder how long it will continue. When an opportunity opens, you immediately imagine the ways it might collapse. When a conversation goes well, part of you prepares for a change in tone. When life becomes quiet, you do not always experience that quiet as peace. Sometimes you experience it as uncertainty. You wait for the next interruption, the next disappointment, the next message that changes everything. You have called this caution, and in some seasons it was necessary. There were moments when your ability to notice danger protected you. There were times when you learned to observe carefully because you had been hurt by what you did not see coming. I do not condemn the part of you that learned to defend itself. It was trying to help you survive what you did not yet know how to carry. But something that protects you during one season can become a wall in another. A shield that once kept pain from entering can eventually prevent love, peace, and trust from entering as well. This is why I am teaching you a distinction that will become increasingly important. Discernment is not the same as panic. Discernment does not scream. It does not force you to make a decision before you can think clearly. It does not require you to imagine every possible disaster so that you feel prepared. Discernment is steady. It allows you to observe. It gives you room to ask questions. It does not make you abandon yourself while trying to avoid an uncertain outcome. Panic is different. Panic exaggerates. Panic tells you that everything must be solved immediately. Panic makes a delay feel like rejection, a question feel like danger, and uncertainty feel like disaster. Panic convinces you to react before truth has had enough time to reveal itself. I want you to learn to recognize the difference. Do not make decisions from a room that is burning only in your imagination. Do not tear down a door because you are afraid it may one day close. Do not run from something good simply because it arrives with less chaos than what you have known before. You may have become so accustomed to emotional intensity that stability feels unfamiliar. You may have confused uncertainty with passion and anxiety with connection. You may have learned to associate love with constantly wondering where you stand. But something healthy does not need to keep you emotionally exhausted in order to remain meaningful. What is good can give you room to breathe. It can allow questions. It can respect your time. It does not need to use silence as punishment or confusion as a form of control. This does not mean that everything good will be effortless or perfect. Growth can challenge you. Truth can require courage. Healthy relationships and worthwhile opportunities may still ask you to stretch beyond what is comfortable. But what is truly good will not require you to continually exchange your dignity for the privilege of keeping it. It will not require you to abandon your conscience or live in a permanent state of alarm. As I rebuild your inner house, I am also teaching your body and mind that they do not need to remain on constant watch. Sometimes faith does not look like making a dramatic decision. Sometimes faith looks like sleeping instead of staying awake trying to control what cannot be controlled. Sometimes it means not sending one more message to force an answer. Sometimes it means turning off the screen and allowing a question to remain unanswered until morning. Sometimes it means drinking water, slowing your breathing, returning to an ordinary responsibility, or simply allowing yourself to rest without believing that something will collapse because you stopped watching it. Sometimes faith means saying no without writing a long explanation. Sometimes it means accepting help without immediately feeling that you owe something in return. Sometimes it means completing the small task in front of you instead of trying to solve the entire future at once. Do not underestimate these quiet decisions. A lasting life is not built only through extraordinary moments. Its strength is formed through small choices repeated when no one is watching. Every time you refuse to abandon yourself, another brick is restored. Every time you choose what is true instead of what fear predicts, another part of the foundation becomes stronger. Every time you receive peace without immediately searching for danger, you create more room within yourself for what is coming next. I am preparing more than the door. I am preparing you to walk through it without carrying every old fear into the new room. Some things around you may still need time. Some people may still need to mature. Some truths may still need to surface. Some situations may still need to settle into their proper place. But part of the preparation is also happening within you, because I do not want to give you something beautiful that your old defenses immediately teach you to fear. I do not want you to receive kindness and spend every day expecting betrayal. I do not want you to receive peace and create chaos simply because chaos feels familiar. I do not want you to receive love and constantly test whether it intends to leave. I am laying a deeper foundation because what is meant to remain needs more than temporary emotion to support it. I am teaching you how to receive without panicking, how to preserve peace without distrusting it, and how to recognize something healthy without measuring it by the patterns that once wounded you. The rebuilding may feel slow, but slow does not mean nothing is happening. Strong foundations are often formed quietly. I am opening windows where comparison once suffocated you. I am clearing the walls where rejection once defined you. I am strengthening the places where fear once made every sound seem like an alarm, and little by little, you are becoming able to stand in a peaceful room without waiting for it to become a battlefield. That is part of the preparation. Before the next door fully opens, I am teaching your heart that peace is not something to fear, goodness is not something to sabotage, and your worth is not something another person has the authority to give or take away. My child, as I continue restoring what has been worn down within you, I also need to teach you something that may feel unfamiliar at first. Peace cannot remain where you continue giving unrestricted access to what repeatedly disturbs it. You have spent many seasons believing that love means always being available, always understanding, always forgiving immediately, always giving one more chance, and always leaving the door open in case someone decides to return differently. You told yourself that patience required you to wait without limits. You believed mercy required you to overlook consequences. You thought having a good heart meant enduring what continually hurt you without ever changing the conditions of access. But love was never meant to require the betrayal of truth. Mercy does not ask you to pretend that harmful choices have no consequences. Forgiveness does not mean returning to the same room and allowing the same pattern to suffocate you again. I am teaching you a more mature kind of love, one that can remain gentle without becoming easy to manipulate, generous without forgetting its own limits, compassionate without surrendering wisdom, and forgiving without reopening every door simply because someone knocks. You need to understand the purpose of a boundary. A boundary is not hatred. It is not revenge. It is not punishment disguised as strength. A boundary is like a door with hinges and a lock. It does not mean that no one may ever enter. It means you are learning when to open, when to close, and how deeply someone should be allowed to come inside. For too long you thought that saying no made you unkind. You feared that stepping back would make you appear cold. You worried that if you stopped explaining yourself, people would misunderstand your heart. But there are moments when continuing to explain does not create understanding. It only gives someone another opportunity to argue against what you already know is necessary. There are moments when distance is not cruelty but protection. There are moments when refusing immediate access is not unforgiveness but wisdom. Some people may resist the boundaries you are learning to establish because they were comfortable with the version of you who had none. They may say you have changed. They may call you distant because you are no longer endlessly available. They may interpret your clarity as hardness because they benefited from your confusion. Do not measure your growth by the discomfort of people who are accustomed to you abandoning yourself for their convenience. I am not teaching you to become proud or unreachable. I am teaching you to stop begging for fragments of what should be offered in honesty and fullness. You have stood outside certain doors for too long, celebrating merely because they opened a few inches. You became grateful for inconsistent attention because you were afraid that asking for clarity might cause you to lose the little you had. You accepted partial presence and called it enough. You tolerated uncertainty because certainty felt too risky to request. You told yourself that if you were patient enough, useful enough, understanding enough, or forgiving enough, eventually the door would open completely. But you were not created to spend your life standing in hallways, waiting for someone else to decide whether you are worthy of being welcomed. When someone truly desires to be present, you should not have to continually decipher their intentions. When something genuinely belongs in your life, it may require patience and effort, but it will not require you to erase yourself in order to keep it. What is healthy can tolerate truth. What is sincere can survive honest questions. What is stable does not need confusion to maintain control. Remember this, because there may come a time when something from your past returns. It may arrive through a familiar voice, an apology you once wished desperately to hear, a promise that sounds more careful than before, or a renewed connection that awakens old emotions you thought had become quiet. Something can return and still not be something I am asking you to restore. Familiarity is powerful. A door you once stood outside for a long time can feel meaningful simply because you remember how badly you wanted it to open. Old things do not always return looking dangerous. Sometimes they return sounding wiser. Sometimes they come carrying gentler words, emotional explanations, regret, or exactly the reassurance you once begged to receive. Do not become afraid when this happens, but do not confuse emotional intensity with genuine transformation. Change is not proved by one conversation. Maturity is not established by one apology. A promise spoken in the right moment can sound beautiful, but foundations are revealed over time. Watch for consistency. Watch what happens when you ask questions. Watch what happens when you need space. Watch how someone responds when you do not immediately return everything to the way it was. What has genuinely changed does not need to pressure you into forgetting the past before trust has had time to grow again. What has matured will respect the fact that rebuilding requires patience. You do not need to condemn anyone who has not changed. You do not need anger in order to recognize reality. You can wish someone well and still understand that they should no longer occupy the same place in your life. You can forgive and still decide that the former level of access is no longer appropriate. You can release resentment without restoring a relationship to its previous form. This is part of surrender. Surrender is not always releasing something because you no longer care. Sometimes surrender means releasing something precisely because you care deeply. But finally understand that caring cannot make another person become ready. You cannot love someone into accountability if they continually refuse it. You cannot carry enough patience to create maturity in someone who does not choose to grow. You cannot keep sacrificing your peace to prove the purity of your intentions. There are things you must place down not because they never mattered, but because they have already taught you what they were meant to teach. And as you release them, I do not want you to look backward at yourself with shame. The former version of you was doing the best they knew how to do with the understanding and healing they possessed at the time. You stayed because you believed promises. You returned because loneliness sometimes made familiar pain look like home. You forgave repeatedly because you wanted to love deeply. You remained silent because you had not yet learned that protecting your voice could also be an act of love. Do not despise who you were. That version of you survived seasons you once thought might break you. Thank them for carrying you this far, but do not require them to lead you any farther. Someone who survived a storm does not need to build a permanent home inside the storm. You can honor the lessons without continuing the pattern. You can acknowledge where you ignored warning signs without turning that awareness into hatred toward yourself. You can recognize where you gave too much without deciding that generosity itself was the mistake. Your softness was not the problem. Your hope was not the problem. Your willingness to forgive was not the problem. What must change is the belief that these qualities require you to live without limits. I am giving your softness a backbone. I am teaching your compassion to stand beside truth. I am showing you that maturity does not mean becoming hard. It means becoming clear. There will be doors you can close without slamming them. There will be people you can release without cursing them. There will be memories you can carry without allowing them to pull you backward. There will be situations you can understand without re-entering them. This is what growth begins to look like when peace becomes more valuable than familiarity. You are not being taught to love less. You are being taught to love without abandoning yourself. You are not becoming less merciful. You are learning that mercy and wisdom can exist in the same heart. And you are not losing what was good in you. I am simply removing the belief that goodness requires you to remain endlessly available to what repeatedly wounds you. There is another layer of healing that you must now begin to understand, because not every obstacle standing between you and peace is visible from the outside. Some of the strongest barriers are hidden within the reflexes you learned during seasons when disappointment became familiar. There is a part of you that still believes it must stay alert in order to stay safe. It remembers what happened when you trusted too quickly, when you believed words that were not supported by actions, when you opened your heart only to discover that someone else was not prepared to protect what you gave them. That part of you learned to anticipate pain before pain arrived. It learned to search for warning signs, study changes in tone, notice delays, question silence, and prepare an escape before you had even entered the room. At one time, these reactions helped you survive uncertainty, but now they can cause you to carry yesterday into places that have not yet harmed you. When something good begins to approach, you may not immediately feel joy. Instead, you may search for the hidden cost. You may wonder how long it will last. You may begin imagining the ending before the beginning has had time to take shape. You may reread old messages, revisit old memories, or search the past for an explanation powerful enough to make what happened feel different. You may delay responding to something sincere because you are afraid of appearing too eager. You may receive a compliment and immediately minimize yourself because being fully seen feels uncomfortable. You may establish a boundary and then abandon it the moment someone becomes disappointed with you. You may test people through distance, silence, or questions, not because you want to manipulate them, but because you are secretly trying to discover whether they will leave the way someone else once did. I see these patterns, and I do not ask you to look at them with shame. They reveal how deeply you once needed safety. You became skilled at reading rooms before entering them. You learned to study another person's face before saying what you truly felt. You learned to hide needs before someone could call them inconvenient. You learned to detect a slight change in a voice, a longer pause between messages, or a difference in someone's behavior because there were times when those small changes warned you that something painful was coming. But I am teaching you that sensitivity does not have to remain enslaved to fear. You do not need to become numb. You do not need to stop noticing. You need to learn how to let what you notice serve truth rather than panic. Your new response begins with a pause. Not silence meant to punish anyone, not withdrawal designed to make someone chase you, but a quiet moment in which you refuse to obey the first fearful story that rises in your mind. When your chest tightens, you do not have to immediately explain yourself. When someone takes longer to respond, you do not have to write the ending of the relationship in your imagination. When an opportunity requires patience, you do not need to interpret the waiting as proof that you have been rejected. Allow reality time to reveal itself. Let actions speak. Let a night pass when there is no genuine danger. Breathe before you decide what something means. Truth does not become less true because you waited long enough to see it clearly. What genuinely belongs in your life will not disappear merely because you refuse to rush toward it in panic. There is also a fear you have sometimes hidden beneath the name of realism, the fear of hope. You told yourself that if you expected nothing, you could not be disappointed. You believed that if you refused to name what you desired, losing it would hurt less. You imagined that constantly preparing for the worst would give you control over the future. But you still suffered. You simply began suffering before anything had happened. You turned peaceful moments into waiting rooms for disaster. You sometimes refused to enjoy what was good because you feared that joy would make future disappointment more painful. But hope was not what wounded you. What hurt you was inconsistency. What hurt you was dishonesty. What hurt you were promises without foundations. Do not condemn hope because someone once mishandled yours. I am not asking you to hope blindly. I am teaching you a hope that can see clearly, ask questions, maintain boundaries, and wait for evidence. You can receive kindness without handing over every key. You can enjoy a good moment without declaring that it guarantees the future. You can allow someone to show you who they are over time without forcing yourself either to trust them completely or reject them immediately. Faith does not require the removal of discernment. Faith releases discernment from panic so that you can see what is actually in front of you. And beneath your fear of hope is another pattern that has exhausted you for a long time, your need to control. This need did not come because you believed you were stronger than everyone else. It grew during seasons when no one told you what was happening and you had to guess. You learned to prepare for multiple outcomes. You learned to take responsibility before anyone asked. You learned to apologize before knowing whether you had done anything wrong. You adjusted your tone to prevent conflict. You solved problems before others had an opportunity to carry their own responsibilities. You became the person who tried to hold the roof together even while you also needed shelter. That ability helped you through difficult seasons, but now it can steal your sleep, your presence, and your ability to receive help. You have sometimes believed that if you loosen your grip, everything will collapse. But not everything is yours to hold. Some things remain standing only because you keep exhausting yourself to support them, and that does not mean they were meant to remain standing forever. Surrender is not irresponsibility. It is the act of placing each responsibility back into the hands where it belongs. Your responsibility is to speak honestly, prepare wisely, keep your word, observe what is happening, and choose what aligns with truth and peace. Other people are responsible for their honesty, their choices, their consistency, their consequences, and their emotions. And there are things that belong only to me. Timing you cannot force, doors you cannot open through anxiety, outcomes you cannot manufacture, and movements you cannot see. When you do another person's part for them, you exhaust yourself and sometimes prevent them from growing. When you attempt to do my part, you begin living as though the entire house depends upon one pair of tired hands. It does not. You can release what was never placed under your authority. And as you do, another hidden hunger will begin losing its power over you, the need for validation. There were seasons when you felt valuable mainly when you were useful, strong, agreeable, productive, or needed. So you learned to enter a room and silently ask what version of yourself everyone required. You gave more than necessary. You explained more than was needed. You worked harder so that no one could call you replaceable. You became the rescuer because being needed made you feel secure. But someone who must constantly prove they deserve to remain will never fully feel at home. Praise may calm the fear briefly, but if approval becomes your foundation, you will always need another person's reaction to tell you who you are. I am rebuilding your worth on something deeper. You are allowed to do good without being noticed. You are allowed not to do everything. You are allowed to disappoint someone when their expectations require you to violate your own limits. You can receive praise without pretending it means nothing, but you do not need to make praise your source of life. The next time you feel compelled to over-explain, pause and speak only what is true and necessary. The next time you want to say yes simply to preserve someone's opinion of you, give yourself time before answering. The next time you feel responsible for rescuing someone, ask whether they have taken responsibility for their own part. Each time you stop chasing approval, another old nail is removed from the wall. Slowly, the image you once carried of yourself begins to change. You are no longer becoming whatever fear demands in order to be accepted. You are learning to live as someone whose worth was established before anyone applauded, chose, praised, needed, or understood them. And from that place, fear can speak without becoming your master, uncertainty can exist without controlling your decisions, and other people's reactions can remain theirs without becoming the measure of your life. Now I want you to bring everything you have learned into the place where discernment becomes practical, because there is likely a person, a relationship, a situation, or an opportunity that has been causing your heart to waver. You already know what I am touching, even if you have not spoken its name aloud. There may be moments when you feel that something has changed, only for uncertainty to return shortly afterward. There may be words that awaken hope in you, yet the actions have not fully created a foundation beneath those words. There may be closeness without clarity, affection without consistency, an apology without enough evidence of transformation, or an opportunity that looks promising while still leaving important questions unanswered. I am not telling you to immediately close the door, and I am not telling you to hand over the key simply because something appears to be moving. I am telling you to observe. What is good can withstand time. Truth can withstand questions. What is genuine does not need you to abandon your discernment in order to preserve it. You have sometimes felt pressure to make quick emotional conclusions because uncertainty is uncomfortable. If someone says what you have long wanted to hear, part of you may want to declare that everything is different now. If an opportunity appears after a long season of waiting, you may feel that you must seize it immediately before it disappears. But waiting has taught you something important. Not every emotional moment is evidence of lasting change, and not every open-looking door is ready to be entered. You do not need to become suspicious of everything, but neither do you need to call every hopeful sign a confirmation. Look at the foundation. Watch what happens after the powerful conversation ends. Watch what happens after the apology has been spoken. Watch what happens when you ask a difficult question, when you need more time, when you say no, when you do not immediately return to the old pattern, and when you refuse to rescue someone from the consequences of their own choices. That is often where truth reveals itself. A person who has genuinely matured will not merely ask you to believe that they have changed. They will begin to live in a way that gives trust somewhere safe to grow again. They will understand that trust is not restored by demanding it. They will not pressure you to erase what happened simply because they now regret it. They will not use tears, anger, affection, distance, guilt, or urgency to force the door open. If they truly understand the damage that was done, they will be willing to respect the time required to rebuild what was weakened. They will understand why you may need to ask questions that once would have frightened you to ask. They will not interpret your need for clarity as an attack. They will recognize that consistency is part of repentance, accountability is part of growth, and patience is part of restoring what was damaged. But if someone only misses the comfort of being loved by you and has not yet learned how to love you responsibly, that will eventually become visible. They may want the former privileges without accepting the new responsibilities. They may want immediate closeness but resist accountability. They may ask you to move forward while becoming irritated whenever you mention what still needs to be repaired. You do not need to condemn them if this becomes clear. You do not need to punish them or prove that they are wrong. You simply need to see what is there. Mercy does not require you to give someone the same level of access they once had. Compassion does not require blindness. Forgiveness does not require pretending that trust has already been rebuilt when it has not. And perhaps the situation that is making you uncertain is not a person at all. Perhaps it is an opportunity. Perhaps something has appeared that seems capable of moving you out of a long season of waiting. It may look exciting because you are tired of standing still. It may promise relief, recognition, financial change, a new beginning, or a path that seems to answer a question you have carried for a long time. But do not allow your weariness to make the decision for you. Ask what the opportunity requires. Does it require you to hide part of the truth? Does it ask you to ignore something within your conscience that continues to trouble you? Does it demand that you pretend not to see warning signs because you are afraid another opportunity may never come? Does it pressure you to commit before you have had enough time to pray, investigate, understand, and ask the questions that matter? Urgency can sometimes be real, but manipulation has difficulty remaining in the light. What is right may still require courage. It may require you to step beyond what is familiar. It may stretch you, challenge you, and ask more of you than you have given before. But it will not require you to betray the truth within yourself in order to enter it. When I lead you forward, there is steadiness beneath the movement. My guidance may carry weight, but it does not need panic to become effective. Fear speaks differently. Fear tells you that if you do not seize this person, this opportunity, this moment, or this door immediately, you will never receive another chance. Fear tries to convince you that scarcity must make the decision. But what I have prepared for you does not depend on your being deceived by pressure. In the days ahead, you may receive a message, a phone call, an invitation, a conversation, or a development that makes it seem as though the door has opened completely. Do not remain outside simply because you are afraid to trust anything again, but do not rush inside merely because you have waited so long. Place your hand on the handle with peace. Look carefully, see whether the hinges are secure. Let the light enter the room before you begin moving your life into it. Ask what needs to be asked. Listen not only to the answers, but to the manner in which those answers are given. Is there respect when you ask for clarity? Is there patience when you need time? Is there accountability when previous choices are discussed? Is there consistency between what is being promised now and what is being demonstrated over time? You are not lacking faith when you examine the foundation. Wisdom does not insult what is good by testing whether it can stand. A wise builder examines the stones because they understand that what is meant to endure must be able to carry weight. I do not want you entering the next season with your eyes closed and calling that trust. I want you to enter what is good with clarity. The wound should no longer be the thing interpreting everything for you. And this is where the deeper miracle begins to become visible. The greatest hidden work has not merely been changing someone else, rearranging circumstances, or bringing a new opportunity closer. The greatest work has been restoring your ability to choose. In the past, one message could determine the direction of your entire day. Someone's silence could make you question your worth. One apology could cause you to overlook what had not changed. One door left slightly open could pull you back towards something you had already begun to leave behind. But that power is weakening. You are learning to listen without being swept away. You are learning to feel without surrendering your judgment. You are learning to love without handing fear control of the steering wheel. You are learning that emotion can be present without becoming an instruction. This is how you will recognize healing. Healing does not mean that you never remember. It means the memory no longer decides for you. It does not mean that you stop feeling sadness. It means sadness no longer commands you to return. It does not mean the old door disappears. It means you can walk past it without feeling compelled to knock. There may come a day when you hear a familiar name, remember a certain place, or think about a season that once had enormous power over you, and you will realize that the burning room inside your chest has become quiet. There may still be tenderness. There may still be unanswered questions, but the pull will no longer rule you. That is not coldness. That is freedom. I am not healing you by erasing your history. I am putting your history in its proper place so that it can become a teacher instead of a jailer. You do not need to keep reopening the trial of everything that has already happened. You do not need to summon the past as a witness against every possibility in your future. You have learned. You have seen. The light has entered the hallway. Your hand has found the key. What matters now is that you trust the clarity you have already been given enough to observe carefully, choose wisely, and refuse to surrender your power simply because something familiar or promising appears at the door. My child, you have reached the place where understanding must become action. You have listened. You have examined the rooms within you. You have learned to recognize the difference between peace and panic, between mercy and self-betrayal, between hope and desperation, between a genuine door and one that only resembles what you once wanted. Now the question is no longer whether you have received enough clarity. The question is whether you are willing to live according to the clarity already placed in your hands. The key I have given you is not meant only to open what is ahead. It also gives you permission to close what should no longer enter your life in the same way. Some doors must be closed, not because you are angry, not because you want revenge, and not because you need to prove that you have moved on, but because you have finally understood what those doors lead to. You do not need to slam them. You do not need to stand on the other side arguing with someone who has already shown you what they are willing to give. You do not need one final conversation if the truth has already been spoken clearly. Sometimes closure is quieter than you imagined. Sometimes it looks like no longer checking. Sometimes it means refusing to respond immediately every time an old pattern reaches for you. Sometimes it means keeping the boundary you already established instead of reopening the discussion because someone is uncomfortable with your decision. Sometimes it means allowing an apology to remain an apology without automatically turning it into restored access. Sometimes it means removing the small point of contact that keeps drawing your attention backward. Sometimes it simply means saying nothing more after you have already spoken the truth. Silence after clarity is not cruelty. It can be the space in which consequences finally have room to do what explanations could not. You have spent enough time standing with your hand on old handles, wondering whether one more attempt might produce a different outcome. There are places where you have already received an answer through inconsistency. There are situations where the pattern has spoken more clearly than the promises. You do not need to keep knocking simply because part of you still remembers what you once hoped would be behind the door. Closing something does not erase the fact that it mattered. It only acknowledges that it can no longer be allowed to occupy the same place in your future. And as you close what belongs behind you, I do not want you to become obsessed with the empty space that remains. A cleared room can feel strange when you have become accustomed to clutter. Silence can feel unsettling when chaos has filled the air for a long time. You may be tempted to return to what was familiar simply because the new room has not yet been furnished. Do not mistake emptiness for absence. The space between what you release and what you receive is not proof that nothing is happening. It is preparation. It is room. It is the place where something different can eventually stand without competing with what should have already been removed. That is why I am asking you for two simple actions, not a dramatic transformation overnight. First, choose one old door that you know you have quietly continued to leave slightly open and close it through one peaceful, specific action. You already know what that may mean for you. It may mean ending the habit of checking something that repeatedly pulls your mind backward. It may mean standing firmly behind one no. It may mean no longer explaining a decision that has already been made clear. It may mean removing an unnecessary point of access. It may mean refusing to return to the same conversation when nothing new has been brought to it. You do not need to announce this action to the world. You do not need anyone to applaud it. Let the quietness of your choice be enough. Then do one small thing to prepare the new room. Complete something you have neglected while your mind was consumed with uncertainty. Organize a corner of your environment. Finish a simple responsibility. Rest your body. Speak honestly with someone who has shown themselves to be safe. Return your attention to something that belongs to your present instead of feeding what belongs to your past. One action of closing and one action of preparation. That is enough for today. You do not have to redesign your entire life in one night. You do not have to know where every future door will lead. You only need to stop using uncertainty as a reason to remain attached to what you already know you must release. And when night comes, I want you to practice another kind of surrender. Turn off the light without walking through every room of your mind to inspect what might go wrong. Stop standing at the window of your imagination, searching for signs of disaster. Stop believing that your constant vigilance is the only thing preventing everything from falling apart. Place the key beside me. The house is not unattended simply because you sleep. The people you love do not leave my care when your eyes close. Tomorrow does not require your anxiety tonight in order to arrive safely. You do not need to rehearse every possible conversation before morning. You do not need to prepare 10 responses to things that have not happened. Rest is not irresponsibility. Sometimes rest is the clearest declaration that you believe I can continue working when you are no longer trying to manage every outcome. I am already present in the tomorrow you are afraid of. I am not asking you to arrive there tonight. When morning comes, rise differently. Do not enter the day as someone searching every room for proof of worth. Enter it as someone who already carries worth. Speak more slowly when fear tells you to explain yourself quickly. Wait when emptiness tries to push you into a decision simply because you are uncomfortable with not knowing. Walk away when the truth has become clear, even if your emotions are still catching up with what your spirit understands. You do not have to feel completely fearless before you act courageously. Courage is often the decision to move according to truth, while fear is still making noise somewhere behind you. Remember who has been beside you in the hallway. Remember who preserved the roof during nights when you did not know how you would continue. Remember who placed light beneath the door before you were brave enough to approach it. I am still here. I am not another voice competing for your attention. I am the foundation beneath your feet. I am not here to make every decision for you, but to remind you that you no longer have to make decisions from the belief that you have been abandoned. I am not returning you to the version of yourself that existed before pain touched your life. I am forming something stronger, a version of you that has walked through pain, learned from it, and no longer allows it to determine every direction. Let that peace move through the entire house now. Let it settle in rooms that once trembled with fear. Let it touch the doors you once guarded through the night. Let it enter the places where you used to believe that one person's response could determine your future. What needed to be said has been said. What needed to begin opening has begun to move, and what needs to close, you already know. You do not need to run. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to keep knocking on doors that have already answered through their inconsistency. Stay within the light you have for this step. Do the simple thing that is in front of you. I will reveal what comes next at the appointed time. And when your hand touches the door of a new day, do not ask first whether someone on the other side will choose you. Walk forward knowing that you are already chosen, that you have learned to choose truth, and that no room, relationship, opportunity, or future is worthy of your presence if entering it requires you to abandon yourself at the threshold.